I think applying the principles is a good idea. Before we get into a specific event in some of the agiles, is to go back and say, what is the motivations of the people driving this? Because a lot of these people are more project management types, and I used to coach my project managers.
So what do you mean? What do you mean these people? Just to clarify,
I'm sorry, the product owners and the engineering managers, they still have, I think, a very project management kind of insight where they're saying, my goal, I've been charged to get this thing done. And so obviously this thing is the most important thing on the planet, and I need to get everyone else to believe this is the most important thing on the planet as well. And I used to do that because otherwise you're going to be never getting anything done because everyone else is going to say my stuff is more important, and they're going to take your resources. And so the idea of how do I grab resources to a problem, and that project management, I got to get this project done. I have a deadline to meet, which is always this driving force in our organizations. Really says now we're going to start vying for resources, right? How do I get these resources on my work rather than working on someone else's work? And the agile response to that was saying, which one has more value? Right? Which thing has the most value for the company? And that's not something they can make usually by themselves, right? That's a higher pay grade kind of decision about where does this value come from. If you're asking the team to make that decision, you're screwed. You're asking the product owners to make that decision, unless they're really good in some sort of weird council and they go, and they meditate together. They're probably not going to be able to make that decision together either, because they're not been charged with that. They've been charged to getting this stuff out. Right? And so who's making that value decision? Because that's what Agile, I think, was going to be the first response before we get into the details and daily activity. Who is deciding what is the most valuable thing for our resources to be applied to? And this is where I think SAFe tries to do a pretty good job. I mean, if I ever said, what is SAFe really bringing to the table on scaling? It was that top level that said, how do we allocate our resources from a value perspective? Right? How do we say, okay, this is how much budget they get. This is how much bandwidth they get. This is how we're going to limit them because these other things are equally or more valuable than this thing. Who's making that decision?
So I'd say what Earl's really talking about from an individual team level is that challenge of being a product owner who can make that call, right? In a perfect little bubble world, if I'm running a Scrum team and I'm a product owner, I get to prioritize that backlog. And I should have all the input I need from product managers or executives or the visionary in my organization to help me appropriately order that backlog based on business value. And Scrum kind of just says, poof, magic happens. You have a product owner, poof, right? And for some of the teams that I've worked with who do this, their product owners are capable of doing it. I've had places where the product owners had all the input they needed. If they saw that there was competing priorities, they had managers or product managers or other resources they could go to and say, hey, there's 3 things here. I need a 1 to 3 ordered list of what the priorities are. And the answer wasn't, they're all priority number 1. Right? Because if the answer is they're all priority number 1, I'm going to do the best I can. But at that point, I think to Earl's point, we have a broader organizational failure. And actually, I think I've spent a fair amount of my life coming in and seeing that broader organizational failure, right? Where you go in and talk to 5 teams. And sometimes this isn't even teams who are doing this reverse scaling. This is just teams who are doing regular old agile development on a single product. And what you realize is there's a real failure to manage the program or the portfolio and to truly provide clear prioritization across my 10 teams or my 20 teams or my 2 teams or my 1 team. And then the folks there are just left struggling to do the best they can. And so then you can't solve that at the team level. You have to talk at the organizational level about, you can't have 10 priority 1 projects.
Right. But you can force that conversation.
But good luck having good value throughput.
Right. But see, here's where you can force that conversation to a certain degree with a process I like to call backfill. Is that if you're this reverse agile scale team, you're getting priorities from multiple resources, and no one seems to be making a decision. Maybe you as a team just say, okay, here's how we're going to allocate our resources. Here is the priority list that we're setting up right now, and publish it. Because once people see a priority list published, they'll go, that's either great or no. But if they say no, they're more likely to try to correct it than to just say everything's priority number one. Because you're saying, well, you've said everything's priority one. So based upon our best judgment, here's how we're going to allocate our time against these multiple ones. If this isn't right, now's a good time to tell us. Forcing that conversation by putting a stake in the ground as opposed to just every sprint blubbering around trying to figure out how to make it work.
And sometimes you can also get a little creative.